Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Sirenitas. And as always, I'm joined by my partners, Kevin Stone and Adam Kirkchin. And tonight, we are joined by Andrew Aurich, head football coach at Harvard. Coach Aurich, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you guys. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And before we talk to Coach Aurich and talk about some Crimson football here, I do want to remind you that if you are in the market to purchase your first home or your next home, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846, or you can email him at herb@mortgageright.com. With 27 years of experience, he has the know-how and the knowledge to put you in a position to purchase your next home. If you do not have a loan officer or someone who's experienced in dealing with lenders, then Herb is your guy. As I mentioned, with 27 years of experience, he has seen it all. Give him a call again at 781-254-2846, or you could shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, Coach Aurich, again, like I said, thank you for taking the time. And let's just jump right into it here. Obviously, your first few months on the job at Harvard. How's it gone so far, and how would you say spring ball went?
I would say it's gone really well so far. The most important thing to me was try to make this as easy a transition for the players as possible, and being able to keep the staff intact as much as I did definitely helped the players out. Just with the schematic part of it on offense, defense, especially. But obviously we made some changes with different things we're emphasizing out at practice, and the players really took to it and embraced it. And I was really happy with how all spring practice went.
I'm curious. Anytime there's a new coach coming in an off season, it's like these guys are your kids. You got to get to know them. How hard has it been, or how easy has it been to get to know these players while you're learning what type of football players they are? You're learning what type of people they are too.
Yeah. So the first full week on the job, I blocked off my entire schedule and had the players sign up for 30-minute blocks to come have meetings with me. Because just like you said, like I didn't really know any of them other than a couple that maybe when I was at Princeton, I had recruited. So to me, it was really important to get to know them, know how they ended up at Harvard, and get to know them beyond just the football part. So it was very intentional, but it was challenging because those are long days. 82 guys I had to meet with. But that was really, really beneficial. It was really beneficial just because I could tell how much the players really loved their coaches and how their coaches were wanted to help them out just beyond just football. To me, that was really important when trying to build the staff. But beyond those meetings, I just try to spend as much time as I can in the locker room after workouts, after practice, just so I can, have those organic conversations that would come up. And then after spring ball, had everybody come through again and sit down. And, we talked a little bit about how they're developing as a football player, but more it was kind of circling back to all those other things that we talked about in that initial meeting and just continue to get to know them. So it is a challenge, but it's a rewarding part, and it's part of why I wanted to be the head coach here. So I really enjoyed it.
Coach, when you were building your staff, how important was it to keep some guys that had been here before to make that transition, not only easy for you, but for the guys as well?
Yeah, it was really, really important. I didn't know the layout, the landscape of Harvard just in general, and keeping them around was definitely going to help me with that. And as I've said to other people, it's kind of like avoiding some unforced errors as you're kind of going through the ebbs and flows of being a new head football coach. So definitely avoided some things just because I did have those coaches here. But the schematic part was real important. Now, I'm a really big fan of Coach Larkey. I had been a big fan of him for a long time, having coached against him. So that was a very easy one for me because what he did defensively while I was coaching against him, I was really impressed with, and I was really happy that he did stay. And then offensively, being vertically aligned is really important to me, and I've been more of an offensive coach, and I have strong philosophies on offense, and it was in line with what Coach Fine was wanting to do moving forward. So it was really beneficial, and the players obviously to kind of hit the ground running in spring ball definitely helped us, and I know it'll help us in the fall too. Just because if you do come in and completely change everything. There's a lot of learning that has to happen, and it won't show up in game one because of the continuity on offense and defense for sure.
Obviously, Coach, when you take over for a legendary figure like Tim Murphy, those are big shoes to fill. It's important to carry over some of what was already established within the program from Coach Murphy and his staff, but it's also important to put your own imprint on the program. How have you been able to balance that, where obviously you kept a fair amount of the coaching staff, there's gonna be carryover, but you also have to put your stamp on the program? How has it been trying to balance that so far?
I think it's gone. I think it's gone really well. When you take over a program that's had as much success as they've had over the last 30 years with Coach Murphy, there's obviously a lot of great things about the program. And I wasn't one of those coaches who was going to come in and be like, I'm changing everything because this is my program now, and we're going to do it differently than it's been done before. To me, it was all about, all right, if I feel very strongly about something, then we'll change it. If I don't, then the way it's been done has obviously been very successful and worked here. So I definitely have, adjusted certain things that I feel strongly about, and I think the players probably picked up on that as kind of, the off season was going until we got to spring practice. And they really took to it. I mean, that was the thing that stood out to me right away was when I got here, like they were already training to win an Ivy League championship. Just because I showed up, that wasn't like you need to flip the switch or anything like that. And it was very obvious that as a team, they had made a decision. All right, whoever this new head coach is going to be, we're going to buy into what he's doing and embrace it. So it's made it really enjoyable for me, to tell you the truth.
When you're the head coach of Harvard, it's, I think, still like one of the best jobs in all of college football. I mean, it's Harvard. It sells itself, and it's got so much tradition. Some people will talk tradition. I feel like Harvard, you just look up at all the national championships from 110 years ago. It's just so cool. How have you felt about being at a place like this? Obviously, you were at Princeton. But what's it been like to sort of soak in all that history that you have at Harvard?
It's been really cool, and I'm still learning as much as I can. And I realized that I don't know enough. I was at a golf outing, and some alumni came up to me, and they started talking about some of those events, and I wasn't as well versed as I need to be. But it's kind of pinch myself at times because I have this opportunity. And I agree 100%. This is one of the best jobs there is in college football. And I got some time still to keep learning about the history, and I'm ready to embrace it all and want to, kind of build on that history here.
Coach, as someone that's been in the Ivy League and experienced everything the Ivy League has to offer, we say it every single year. We love covering it because of how competitive it is. Any year, literally any team can win the league. But now in particular, do you feel like it's as competitive as it's ever been?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, you see that with the scores every Saturday in the Ivy League. And when you watch tape of, all the different Ivy League teams, this talent is so close. So the margin for error is so small. And, the teams that, can execute at the highest level and can take care of the ball and take it on offense and take it away on defense. That's how you got to be able to differentiate yourself for sure.
Coach, what appealed to you about the job aside from the tradition and the prestige of the job? What else appealed to you when the job opened up? Why did you want this opportunity?
So I wanted to be an Ivy League head football coach for a while now. It all kind of stems back to my first experience coaching the Ivy League. When I was at Princeton, I was a running backs coach, and it was such a fun experience working with those student athletes that are so self-driven, and they want to be coached hard, and they just want to be successful at everything they do. And having played in the Ivy League, I kind of felt this connection with them that I know what they're going through, and I'm able to kind of give them advice beyond just a football field. And when I left there and went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it was an awesome experience, but it was not at all like the experience I had when I was coaching at Princeton. So from that point forward, it was all right. I want to be an Ivy League head football coach. I got to do everything I can to make that happen. So it was very, specific with all the moves I made from that point forward to make sure I was, ready for the opportunity when it presented itself. To me, this job is the best job in the Ivy League, and that's what really appealed to me. Having the opportunity to impact student athletes that I really enjoy being around and being at the best school in the Ivy League, it made it really easy for me to go all in and try to get this job.
I was curious. I mean, this is sort of along the same lines, but I think recruiting to Harvard, one of the best things about it is that you don't really have to explain what Harvard is to some of these kids. Like, I know there's some schools where they may have never heard of the school before. They've heard of Harvard. But what are some of the challenges that come with that too? I know there's definitely some, but like what's unique about recruiting to a place like Harvard?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenge obviously is, finding the right academic fit with the recruits. So, you can find an elite player who would want the opportunity to play at Harvard, but if their academics throughout high school don't match up with what is the type of student that's going to have the opportunity to get into school here, you're kind of wasting your time. So it really shrinks your list pretty quickly. And then the reality of, not offering athletic scholarships, that also plays into the equation, especially, we can compete with anybody in the country when it comes to, recruiting. But then those factors start to play in, and that, especially the financial aid part of it can lead to, kind of falling out with some guys, because ultimately the decision to play for free versus paying whatever the number is really hard for the family, and they just can't move forward with it. But that being said, the right student athlete and family understands the investment they're making well beyond college by sending their son to Harvard. So that there's a lot more that want to be here than they choose not to be here because of that factor.
Coach, you mentioned your time with Tampa Bay. What can you kind of take from that and apply it as a head coach, or do you sort of want to get away from anything that you may have experienced in the NFL, since it is just such a different world in college football?
I would say probably the biggest takeaway as far as football goes was just like the awareness of personnel on both sides of the ball, and how you have to be able to match the personnel when you're on defense with what the offense is putting out there. I just remember we were getting ready for the New Orleans Saints, and they had multiple running backs and multiple tight ends, and they would go put 21 personnel on the field, but depending who the tailback was and depending who the tight end was, it significantly changed their tendencies with run pass. So we had all these 21 personnel groupings that we had named different things, and it made the breakdown very hard because I was breaking down the tape. But that was very clear to me. And at that point, I was a significantly younger coach, I guess it wasn't on my radar as much, but that immediately changed when I was in the NFL. And I mean, nowadays in college football, that's the standard too. Like you have to be aware of the personnel on the field, and that's going to dictate your personnel on defense. And the other thing was I was on defense when I was down there, so that year I learned a ton. I was working for Bill Sheridan, who was a longtime Giants coach, came down there to be the defensive coordinator. And, really we were running the defense that we've been running at Rutgers, but Bill hadn't run that defense. So for him, like he was learning that defense, and then it was he was putting his own spin on it, and just learning from him as he was, adjusting that defense was really, really beneficial, and understanding, what his philosophy was and how it fit with what we were doing defensively. I learned a ton defensively that year.
How much have you been able to pull from guys like Greg Schiano, Coach Surace, all these guys that you've been around, that you've had an opportunity to work for through the years?
A ton. And it's funny because if you when I look back at my career, like I've worked for Bob Serace or Greg Schiano for almost my entire career. So I got to spend a ton of time with them and learn a ton from them. You know, how I want to do things here is very similar to how Bob does it at Princeton, being a CEO, head coach who, you know, he has his philosophies on offense, defense, and special teams, but he's not going to, you know, force the issue with his coordinators. Just more about giving them your vision, and then they carry out the week to week game planning, and how it goes, and you know how he recruits, how he understands the balance between academics and football, was something that stuck with me, and was had a profound impact on me, and that's how I want to do things here, for sure. Coach Yano, when I left Princeton to go back to Rutgers, to me it wasn't about I want to be a Power 5 coach, because I still wanted to be an Ivy League head football coach. To me, it was I got to go work for Coach Yano again and learn, because Coach is as intentional and detail oriented person as you ever be around, and he shared a lot with us as a staff. And to me, it was unbelievable. I mean, we were in the staff meetings. I'm taking notes and notes and notes because I know this stuff is just gold. Program building, culture building, X's and O's, situational football, how to recruit, how to build relationships with your players. All this stuff was great stuff, and it's how I'm doing things here. Just because as I learned from him, I just believed in it so much, and I could see how it was changing that place, and knew it would work here and it would help us take it to another level.
How much are you watching of I'm sure you watched all of them, but like how much are watching football from these guys that you have now from last year, from the year before? Like how much film are you catching up on of your own guys?
I've watched quite a bit. And then when we got into spring practice, obviously I was watching what we were doing in spring practice. But what I've done since spring ball ended is I've tried to go and watch all the TV copies of the games, and that's something I learned from Coach Yano. Watching the TV copies, because you pick up on so many little things in between the plays that it's really beneficial. Just how different players react to different things that happen in the game. It kind of gives you an understanding of their psyche, in the heat of the moment out on the field. So like that's how I've been spending my evenings. Really, is like, all right, I'll pop on another game that was on ESPN Plus and watch that and pay close attention. And I'm watching on my iPad, so I got my phone out and I'm taking notes on my phone as I see different things. And I'm gonna keep watching tape until we get to the season, and then I'm gonna be caught up in preseason camp tape, and then we'll get to the opponent. So quite a bit.
Coach, I want to go back to sort of the process of you taking this position. And I know you touched on it in your introductory press conference, but for those that don't know, how much, if at all, did you talk to Tim Murphy during the process? And I guess, did you kind of get his blessing when taking over?
I didn't talk to him during the process. Once I was hired, Erin McDermott, our AD, she connected me with him, and he was great. Just giving some insight into different parts of the program, and told me he's happy to help any way he can, moving forward. And he's given me some pretty good advice, since I've been here early on there, about different things, and he's been really helpful.
And just as a quick follow-up, was there ever any hesitation on your part about being the next guy, following a legend like him?
None whatsoever. I'm not scared of that part at all. In fact, I saw that as a huge positive, because I get to walk into a program that has recruited at a really high level for a long time and has a great foundation to what the program is. And to me, that's a benefit. I mean, these guys, they want to share the Ivy League championship last year, and there's a ton of talent coming back. I have no problem with, high expectations, going right into the first year. I would expect nothing less.
You are watching / listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Serenitas. This week, we're joined by new Harvard head football coach Andrew Aurich. And just as a reminder, if you are in the market to purchase your first home or sell your current home and move into your next home, give our friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846, or you could shoot him an email at herb@mortgagerite.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. Coach, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that makes the Ivy League great in many ways is the rivalries. And it's so unique because you guys start later. You don't get a bye week during the season. You play 10 weeks straight through. What are some of the challenges, though, that come with that? Even though you're starting later, the fact that you're playing 10 straight games and competing for a league title, that can be challenging in itself.
Yeah, for sure. You have to stay on every week. And Coach Yano always talked about it's always about playing one-game seasons. And I think that fits in the Ivy League perfectly because there is no off week. There's no bye week and there's no off week as far as like you can't have a clunker because that's immediately going to affect where you are in the standings. I would say like probably the biggest challenge that could pop up is depth because there's no bye week to kind of recover with that depth, and because as was talked about earlier, like the talent level is so even in the league that there's not a lot of games where it's gonna be like, all right, we're up by a good amount here. Let's get these guys out of here and give them a rest. Like you're gonna need those guys to win all those games. So depth is the biggest thing, and that's why you got to develop depth. So that way, these freshmen, like we got to get them caught up because some of them are really talented, and we're going to be counting on them at some point during the season to get that depth where it needs to be. So if there are injuries or to prevent injuries by keeping guys fresh, those guys are ready to go.
Shane McLaughlin is one of the better backs, I think, in the Ivy League. What have you seen from him, and what's he like as a person and as a leader?
Extremely hard worker. He goes about his business. He's very, very serious in everything he does in regards to football program, workouts, weight room, practice. Really consistent with his effort throughout. He is a really thoughtful person, and when he speaks to the team as the captain, those guys listen because he's speaking from the heart and he's giving them really good, thoughtful, pieces of advice to the team. And you could tell that those guys really trust him and, they're going to follow him. I've been really, really happy with him. He's been great with me. He definitely has the pulse of the team, which is really important as the captain. So that way, as I have questions about, where we're at with different things, I just can go right to Shane because I know, he'll shoot me straight and he has a really good feel for the team as a whole.
Coach, when I was at spring ball with spring practice and your spring game, one, it didn't feel any different than it did, in years past around here. And I know you want to put your own stamp on it, but then again, how important was it to you to sort of keep things as, I guess, normal as possible for the guys? And just in general, how do you think that kind of took on those first few weeks when you first showed up?
Yeah, I mean, once you get out there practicing and your offense versus defense out there, it's the guys just kind of get back in the flow of we're playing football out here, and there's not a lot of different ways to do it once you're out there and you're just playing football. So I think for the guys, they probably forgot who the head coach was at that point. And they're just playing ball, which is the way it should be. And to me, like when I first got here in those first couple of weeks, I was doing a lot of evaluating of what we were doing and how those guys were doing it because just getting to know them, had that conversation with them, but now how do they carry themselves when we're out there training or we're out there at practice. So I was doing a lot of just kind of taking in their reactions to different things. But yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say maybe they kind of felt like, oh, it was definitely different is I was really challenging them to understand situational football and, what was happening. And we were trying to change that up for them. And I thought they responded really well the whole spring. as we kind of changed what we were doing in different team periods and keeping them on their toes. That to me is the ability to focus, be mentally tough enough to focus especially when you're tired. And that was what I was trying to get across them as we were in practice.
Just, Coach, I just want to get your thoughts. And again, you've only been here one spring, but I just want to get your thoughts on the quarterback position, most important position on the field, arguably the most important position in sports. Just some thoughts on the quarterbacks or some of your early impressions and where you guys are at that position.
I'm really excited about our quarterback room. There's a lot of talent in there. I thought Charles DePrima and Jaden both had very good springs. They both did some really good stuff, some stuff we need to clean up, but they have a skill set that can win in the Ivy League consistently. Charles is a really special athlete when he's got the ball in his hands, and so is Jaden. I mean, he can run now, so it kind of opens up the offense when you have guys who have the ability to do that. And it makes it harder on the defense because once the quarterback can run the ball, they got to account for him every single play. So I've been really happy. They go about their business the right way out of practice. They have leadership qualities that you want to have in the quarterback. So I've been really happy with both of them.
I want to know. So I ask this every time I get a chance to talk to an Ivy League coach, but is there going to be in the near future or future at all Ivy League team in the FCS playoffs? Because I think a lot of people would love to see that. I know winning the Ivy League is a huge accomplishment, and maybe you don't want to, water that down by having a championship after. But I think it would be a lot of fun to see Harvard, to see Yale, to see Princeton in a playoff setting, going up against a North Dakota State, going up against a Montana, going up against a Texas State. Well, I don't think they are anymore. But where do you stand on that?
I would love to go to the playoffs. To be able, just like you said, to be able to, show how strong Ivy League football is versus those teams in the FCS level. I think that would be huge. And I can't speak to when it will happen, but I would love for it to happen very quickly because the top team in the Ivy League, I think it compete with anybody in the country for sure.
To kind of piggyback off of that, when you're recruiting, is that ever like a sticking point? Like obviously kids want to compete for national championships, whatever level it might be. Yes, the Ivy League is prestigious, but is that ever kind of a conversation you need to have with a kid?
Yeah, definitely. That conversation comes up. As with all the differences with the Ivy League versus FCS football and FBS football, I address those right up front because they need to understand what they are choosing to be a part of. Because reality is yes, I would love for us to go to the playoffs, but we can't currently go to the playoffs. So you have to know what Ivy League football is all about. But when you explain to them all the positive benefits of the experience you have here, it does not weigh in heavily in, I would say, anybody's decision ultimately in the recruiting process.
Coach, speaking of recruiting, you'll hear coaches talk locally about the importance of putting a fence around the area and keeping local prospects at home. That's easier said than done for an Ivy League school. Obviously, there's a lot of academic components that go into recruiting, but how important is it for you guys to be able to get the local talent that you recruit in the fold? Because you're not just competing against programs that are coming in from other parts of the country, but you're competing against Brown, you're competing against Yale regionally. How important is it to get those guys that you're recruiting that do fit your profile and can get into the school?
Yeah, it's really important. But I would say it's really important to get any recruit that we target as we want them. But even more important with those guys right in our backyard, just because, they're right here and the ability to have them around campus more is a lot easier. So, one of the challenges in Ivy League is you're recruiting nationally. So, that kid from California, it's hard to get him to campus. But a recruit from Massachusetts, like we can get them over 3 times in the spring if we're recruiting the right way. So that's why it's important, because we should be able to win in those recruiting battles all day long, because the access they have to us and to be on our campus is so much easier.
Another thing of, I mean, you're in New England. It's but again, it's Harvard's an international school. I mean, in terms of who comes there, you get guys from everywhere. But how much have you seen in terms of watching film of the New England players, whether it be Connecticut, whether it be New Hampshire, whether it be Massachusetts? What have you noticed?
Well, I mean, because I've been in the Northeast and I've been recruiting, players from this area for a long time. I feel pretty comfortable with it. I mean, there's really, really good football in New England, and I would say it's not just prep schools; it's public schools. All the different areas, you're going to find those players. And you look at our roster; we have guys from all those different areas. So, to me, you can find them anywhere in the country. So we better know about the ones that are here, for that reason that they are so close to us. I've been real impressed. You talk to these guys on the team that are from the area. Like, obviously, the coaches here do a really good job of preparing these guys for college, because they have a high football IQ for sure.
Sticking with the recruiting, coach, how important is it to build those relationships with the local high school coaches around here?
I think it's very important, and I have a staff that knows the area very well and knows the high school coaches, and they've done a really good job of connecting me with those coaches. And they'd come to practice. They're like, "Coach, you got to go talk to this coach. You got to go talk to this coach." And I'm open to talk to all high school coaches in the area, and the coaching staff, they do a good job of making sure I'm getting connected with those coaches for sure.
Coach, Harvard traditionally has been a program that has won along the line of scrimmage. They've produced a lot of NFL caliber offensive and defensive linemen. What are some of your early impressions of what you guys have coming back along the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball?
The offensive line, we have some really good older players that have played a lot of football here. Austin Gentle at center is a really, really good player and seasoned, smart football player. And Mike Entwistle plays next to him. They both have played a lot of football up to this point in their career, and that was very evident during spring ball. You could just see how they go about their business and the reactions. To me, it's like when you're an offensive lineman, there's learned reactions you have to the movements of the defensive lineman, and the more football you play, the faster those reactions are from the offensive line. So those guys, they played at a high level during the spring. And then we have some really talented young tackles that flashed throughout the spring, where you see why they were recruited as highly as they were. One I'll mention is Max Bowman. He hasn't played a lot of football here, but he was highly recruited, and his body changed this offseason. And as spring went on, you saw him getting better and better, and you're like, yeah, that's why he had the opportunities he had coming out of high school, because there's a lot of talent there. So it's kind of exciting to see it's kind of tapping into that this spring. Defensive line, Brandon Svetz at defensive end had a really, really good spring. And he's a talented kid, has a really, really high motor. And that flashed on tape when I was watching the tape from last year. So it was exciting to see that this spring. Dominic Young-Smith was one that on the inside who I had when I first got here. I watched the tape. He was like a rotational guy, and then you see him in the weight room and you see him work out. You're like, oh, this kid's a pretty good player. And then he just took off this spring and did a ton of good stuff inside there. But the depth of the defensive line is impressive. They've always played a lot of defensive linemen here. So I could name off 10 guys because, a lot of these guys have experience just because that's how many guys they were playing. When I was at Princeton, it was almost comical. You'd be getting ready for Harvard and you'd be like, they're playing 12 defensive linemen. It's like they're doing hockey substitutions and running those guys in and run those guys off. And I'm like trying to figure out, is there is there like a way this rotation happens? And I'm like writing it out. And I'm like, no, there's no way this rotation happens. Just get the next 4 in, when they couldn't. So that's going to help us this year, just because the way it's been done here previously, these guys have a lot of experience.
With Harvard Yale specifically, I know we talked a little bit about rivalries, but it's such a huge rivalry, not just with those schools, but really the country pays attention to it. But do you keep an eye on them kind of in the back of your mind a little bit, even on days when you're not supposed to be watching any Yale film? You maybe watch a little Yale film. Like, what's that? What's it like being a part of that right now?
Well, we run across them so much in recruiting that it's hard not to be thinking about them. So they are kind of always on my mind. But the reality is, like, to make that game even more important at the end of the season, we got to make sure we take care of business, 1 week at a time leading up to that. But you hear their name a lot, whether it's players or alumni, because it's a really important game. So it's hard not to have them on your mind, for sure.
Coach, I want to go back to the defense. In that spring game in particular, the linebackers stood out, above all else. I think it was either 2 or 3 interceptions that morning that they had down in the red zone. We talked about D-line, but what else do you like about your defense? Again, I know it's only June, but what have you liked about that defense so far?
Mitch Gonzer and Eric Little are 2 linebackers that I was really impressed with in the spring. They both had played a lot of football here, but just within this defense, when you understand it, you're able to react at such a faster on a faster point, and they were flashing that all spring and playing really, really fast. And when you understand the defense, like, your talent just shines through because you're reacting so fast. So I was really, really impressed with them, and kind of how they just worked at practice. The defensive backs, it's a talented group. Ty Bartram did not practice this spring. He was healing up, and watching he's one of those guys, when you watch the tape from last year, you're like, this kid's a special player. So I'm excited to see him in training camp. But Gavin Shipman had a really good spring, played at a high level at corner. And Damian Henderson, who played every game for him as a freshman, he's a really special player. When I got here, I heard about how smart a football player he was, and without testing him, like, you could see that when he's out there playing, because he just plays so fast. So I'm excited about all 3 levels of the defense. And there's a lot of guys there who've played a lot of football, and excited to kind of to see how they take off here in training camp.
Coach, final question from us tonight. Just some thoughts on camp and the upcoming season. I'm not going to ask you to predict how do you think you guys are going to finish, but what are some of your year 1 expectations for Harvard football?
To me, the things that I want to see that will ultimately lead to wins is I want to see a team that's obsessed over the ball, and that's offense and defense, because turnover margin is the single biggest indicator of win-loss percentage at any level of football. So I want to see an offense that's obsessed about taking care of the ball, and a defense that's obsessed about taking away the ball. And that will lead to, success on Saturdays. I want to see a team that is the smarter football team every Saturday. And that's about understanding situational football. And those 2 areas I look at as my job as the head coach, to make sure those are being emphasized every single day. And then the last part is we have to be the team that consistently finishes on offense and consistently swarms on defense. And that has to shine through on tape. When people put on our tape, we have to look different than everybody else. They should put on our tape and be like, whoa, those guys from Harvard, they play extremely hard. So to me, the expectation is those things have to be showing up every single Saturday. And if they do, we're going to have success. Because I know our coaches are going to do a great job every week of game planning for the opponent. But those 3 areas, like, that'll separate us.
Well, Coach, I want to say thank you for taking the time, my friend. Greatly appreciated. We're pumped about your arrival here in New England to coach a Harvard football program. We look forward to working with you hand in hand this fall to cover the program. And certainly from our standpoint, if you ever need anything, you guys of the program, feel free to reach out. Our number one priority here is to promote New England football from the Patriots down to college, down to high school. So anything we could do to help, looking forward to working with you, my friend.
Likewise. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Coach.
Right,
that
take
is
care.
Andrew Aurich, new head football coach at Harvard. Before we go, I'm wearing the hat tonight from last week's girls flag football championships at Gillette Stadium. We went down and covered it. And I want to say one thing. First of all, very impressed with the event. Okay. It was an unbelievable event. The other thing that really got my attention was the athleticism of these girls. I mean, they played their hearts out, but they made some big plays. I'm talking one-handed catches, one-handed picks, making people miss in space. It is a lot of fun. And I think the MIA needs to take a long, hard look at making flag football a spring sport, especially for girls. I think that the appetite is there. There were 23 schools that participated this year. The Patriots' hope is that by a year from now, we have 50 schools or more participating. We're here for it. I couldn't have enjoyed myself more. It was a pleasure to cover the event. We're looking forward to covering it again next year. But if anybody from the MIA is watching, let's make this an official sport. Whether you played in the fall, you played in the spring, I don't care when you do it. There's an appetite there for girls who want to play football. I'd prefer to see it in the spring because if a young lady would like to play tackle football in the fall, she has that option, and then she can play flag football in the spring. But either way, it's a great game, great product, and I strongly encourage it. And for those people out there that are afraid it's going to take away from softball or girls lacrosse, it's not. There's enough girls out there that are not playing a sport or maybe trying out for a sport and not making it that could play flag football, have a great time, be competitive, and have something that they identify with. So great event. Congratulations to St. Mary's of Lynn for winning the girls flag championship. They're your 2024 state champions. And again, let's make this a spring sport for girls. I think it would be fantastic. Like I said, the passion is certainly there for it. All right, gentlemen, final thoughts here. Great interview, by the way, with Coach Aurich. I think the program is in great hands. Any final thoughts here before we wrap it up?
Yeah, perfect segue. The Renegades start their playoff run this weekend, looking for, I believe, a 6th straight WFA championship. I'll be talking to Coach and a couple of players tomorrow, so be on the lookout for our playoff preview. But it's playoff time for them again, and don't be surprised if we're talking about another women's championship in about a month or so.
And it's almost July, and you know what that means. It's 7-on-7 season, piggybacking off of that. And it'll be a lot of fun in the sun. Maybe it'll be a little too hot. I know some of the hottest events I've ever covered have been these 7-on-7s, and it gets scorching out there. So drink as much water as you can, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it should be. You got the Northeast 7-on-7, the various regionals coming up, but you also have some other 7-on-7s as well. Kevin was over at Boston College last week. You had some stuff down at UConn this weekend. So it's certainly that time of the year. And as we say to you guys all the time, we're one step closer to football season being here. And real quick, Mass Pirates pick up a big win this weekend down in Jacksonville, and they are now 7-6 on the season, but they need to play their best football of the year here and win out to have any shot of getting into the playoffs in the Eastern Division. I did have an opportunity at last week's girls flag football championships to talk to Patrick Pass, who's involved with girls flag football and with the Mass Pirates. And one of the things he pointed out was Pirates are exclusively brand new on defense. You got Rod Miller, the new head coach. He's coming. He's running the D. Everybody's new on defense. It has shown at times. But if this defense can start to get on the same page now and start to play better, one thing we know about the Pirates, they could score points. Alejandro Benefield and company can sling it. So, it's that time of the year now for them to make a playoff push. And Jimmy Robinson, their running back, I mean, look, not for nothing. If this kid doesn't at least end up in an NFL camp, it'll be disappointing because he is a flat-out dude. He was once again the catalyst for the Pirates this week in their big win. Lost a heartbreaker last week at home, 52-51 to the San Antonio Gunslingers. Great name, but they bounced back with a big win over the Jacksonville Sharks. Well, that'll do it for this week's show. For Kevin and Adam, I'm John Serenitas. Till next time, peace.